listening to the 10 Questions with the Musical Mind podcast with your host, Peter Harris.
Hey everyone, Peter Harris here. Welcome back to 10 Questions with the Musical Mind. This week we welcome renowned guitarist Nili Brosh. Of course, Nili is well known for her solo works such as Through the Looking Glass and A Matter of Perspective. And in addition to that, she's played with so many just top musicians like herself, Tony McAlpine, just the list goes on and on of the amazing people she's shared the stage with. So we get together and we talk about her songwriting, her challenges in coming up with, new compositions and, how to let go of a composition once you've done completing it, like knowing when it's finished. Also, biggest news yet is we talk about her nearing completion of her upcoming solo work. It's going to have a lot of variety to it. So let's sit back and enjoy this conversation with the one and only Nili Brosh.
Hey, Peter, what's going on?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, definitely. I want to go off, on several topics here, but one thing I'm interested in is I know you came over to the States when you were about 12, is that right? What I'm curious about as far as people's inspirations and influences is, do you have vivid memories of the music you listened to in Israel or your family listened to?
Yeah, and that kind of, most of my early influences came from what my family was listening to.
Okay.
Us being in Israel at that time, in a way, is almost kind of a coincidence because my family and I'm the youngest of four, so my siblings specifically, listen to like a lot of classic rock and 80s rock and that kind of thing. Especially for me growing up in the, early 90s. So it wasn't necessarily that we had a lot of ethnic music in the house, if that's maybe what part of what you're asking. But it still came from what was around me. And actually now I'm realizing that towards, the later part of my upbringing, it was me who kind of went and investigated my roots in kind of an indirect way. It wasn't necessarily that I was looking for that kind of music or anything. Mm-hmm. I just kind of, having moved at such a young age, not really knowing my own culture as an adult and that kind of thing, I just went to movies and TV and documentaries and stuff like that so hard over the years.
Sure.
And that's the music that I'm writing. I'm like, where is this coming from? And then I'm just well, it must be that my roots are in there somewhere.
Sure.
But from a culmination of almost kind of trying to make up for it over the years. And now it's coming out. So it's kind of interesting that you asked that because it's almost backwards.
Yeah, and I was actually asking not out of what was the cultural influence of music, but more out of my own ignorance of what would have been played over there. And both are pertinent, but I'm just unaware of.
To be honest, they love rock and roll in Israel.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And MTV was really big over there at that time too, and everything. So and especially now with the internet, it's completely different. But
sure.
There was nothing that would have been different for me, I don't think. And if anything, I guess the different thing in my family would have been just that I had, again, older siblings and had the reach to the older music rather than what was going on at the time, I guess.
Gotcha. Yeah, but that is cool that at some point you wanted to explore on your own the actual music of your heritage and try to explore that and that's probably better explored maturity, I think.
Probably. Again, even with that, it wasn't necessarily that I was looking for the music specifically. I thought that I had heard what the music kind of was, and I knew what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it. And even that wasn't a true perception of what was going on. But if anything, I was just kind of oh, it's cool. I know what that music sounds like, but let me know the history, let me know what, my culture is. And then as a result, I'm well, that score is really cool, and these
right.
changes are really cool. And then I was just God, there's so many great writers, at least working on film and TV. And again, it was all just kind of a roundabout.
Yeah. Roundabout kind of way. Yeah. Now I'm going to take a corner here.
Okay.
I know I've seen you play both the 6 and 7 string guitar.
Mm-hmm.
what were the adjustments you had to make? Because I've never played a 7 string. Are there bigger things than the neck radius? Is it more to do with like what note choices are available to you and how it alters the bottom end of a scale? I mean, what's the biggest adjustments you have to make?
I mean, I think it's all of those things.
Okay.
But like for me, my coming into the 7 string thing was actually not like really on purpose. I had to start figuring it out because I started playing with Tony McAlpin. I had to figure out how to play some songs on it for the audition,
Okay.
because all the music was for 7 string. And so for me, it was just like, well, I know I'm not going to like learn how to play this instrument in a week, but at least I have to be able to like visually go from that 6 to that 7 just to like learn these particular songs,
Sure.
So, so that was like really the hardest thing for me, was like just the visual confusion of, I can hear the stuff, I can still learn the songs on this instrument in relation to like where everything is now on this, with this extra string, but like it's just visually confusing the hell out of me because nothing is that I want to grab is like where I think it is, everything is
Really?
like a string over. So, I kind of struggled with that for a while. And actually, it was Tony who gave me really good advice with that. He just kind of said, like, I think the thing to do with that is to play a bunch of stuff that you know really well, because it'll just kind of make it more familiar visually in the context of adding that next string. And then it just doesn't faze you anymore,
Okay.
So now I have, after that, going between 6 and 7 strings, it didn't really I didn't notice it anymore after a while. It was just kind of like, this is an instrument, this is an instrument, and that's kind of the way that I've always thought about it, It's just that extra string, it gives you real estate that you don't have with a 6 string, but to me, like, I don't think of it like I need this guitar, like, all the time because 6 strings aren't enough or something like that. It's just like, it's like you were saying, some of the lines and some of the ideas might kind of delve into that, but some may not. So it depends on what I'm playing now. And, it's also only a fourth down from the E string if you're tuned in standard. So it's not like it's as big of a difference as people think it is. Most of that string is just repeating notes in the same register that you already have.
Okay. Gotcha.
So it just depends on like the it.
That makes sense. Now, I like it, listening to your body of work. A couple of your songs kind of stand out as departures for me, and ones I really like. I'm thinking of like Yolanda, but one of my favorites is Hat Tricks.
Oh, cool! Thank you.
Yeah, I really like that one.
Like this new album, then there's plenty of departures.
Well, cool, good. I'm looking forward to it. Now, I want to know the inspirations behind those songs, and one is maybe my musical ignorance. Like Hat Tricks is that a bossa nova sound? What's the vibe of that?
Yeah, I think it's a bossa nova feel for the verses, and I mean, again, to me, it's just like I never really thought of it like, okay, now I'm gonna take it to like this direction, or I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna do that. I feel like my music is always like a product of, again, that mishmash of influences that come out one day and not always explained. Although with this stuff, I was going to Berkeley at that time and I was being exposed to a lot of that kind of music. So it wasn't really surprising that was coming out. But, I try not to like necessarily put it in one box and just kind of go with what I think the song is asking me to do or what I think would be right. And I try not to question it too much because I would if I let myself do it,
Right.
And also because I don't pretend to be a master of all these different styles. I just feel like this vessel that heard so many things that like every once in a while something different comes out and I'm like, well, I can't really always explain it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve to be explored.
Sure.
Yeah.
And a big thing about that is with the unlimited facility you have with digital recording.
Yeah.
A big part of the art, I think, is letting go and saying, okay, it's finished. Because it is
really hard.
You can constantly fidget with it.
Yeah, it's extremely hard to do that, and I'm so that person, and it doesn't even have to be with that, but once I start tinkering with something, I can really go on forever. So at least I know that, and that's what producers are for. they're there to like cut you off when you don't know what's better for you, you know?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. I was having a conversation with you and I were talking before the interview started about Van Halen, and
Yeah.
there's a couple projects that Eddie has done where I'm like, he really could have used one less yes man. Like,
Yeah.
you talk about the brilliance of a good producer and saying, let's do this, let's do that, let's don't do this, and let's end it here. It's probably a good thing. Yeah.
It's hard, it's a fine line, because it's like at the end, I think the artist probably, hopefully, has final approval, and like you never know what comes down in those situations. That's the thing, and I think when you're in the middle of making something, your head can only be in so many places, and it's really easy to miss stuff. And going along with that issue of like, well, if nobody stopped me, I would go on forever. Once you've been stopped and then you go back and you like miss the thing that you didn't notice for the last 2 weeks because you were in it, you're like, why'd you stop me?
Right. Yeah,
so
that makes
like,
total sense. Yeah.
There's always like, something will have to be like, decisions sometimes have to be made, and sometimes they're the best ones and sometimes they're not, but sometimes you just got to move forward because otherwise that record would probably be made forever.
Right. And looking on the outside in, a producer can be like, oh, that one pull off you did over that F major chord, that could be a hook.
Yeah.
And to
and
you,
then
it's just
would be like, no, I hate this take, let me play it again, or
right.
something like that.
But they can pick out like, no, that one pull off was great.
Right.
Repeat that, and to you, it was just a pull off in a series of 25 notes. Right.
Yeah, and to you, they all sound like every take you thought you played the same, until you listen back and you're like, yeah, these are not the same.
Right. Now, how did you get involved with Cirque du Soleil?
I had actually a long history with them, with trying to like make it work with them for like 5 years before I actually started working for them. But their Michael Jackson show in Vegas, which I was a part of, was being created in 2012, and they had kind of an open casting call for female guitar player because I think they, were aware that it was not maybe the easiest thing that they were going to cast. And so I think every female guitar player that I know, we all kind of just sent those videos and did the open casting call and whatever. And I was a finalist, and I'd been talking to them, and it didn't work out. And then a couple of years later, they, thought that they might need a backup for Gina Gleason, who was the original Muse character. And then that didn't work out. And then like finally, like a few years later, they called me back and they were like, okay, like now we have a spot open. And then like, finally I auditioned in person, and like, it was funny how such a long road was to just basically line something up that was like, you need to walk in here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it started. And they have their casting is public. You know what I mean? They have a casting website that everybody can kind of check out, and they have different criteria, I think, based on if you're a musician, an actor or whatever, like, acrobat, they'll have like a list of qualifications. And I think usually most of those gigs are like big reading gigs, they're pit band gigs and everything. And this particular show is just like such a different situation because
Sure.
Because we're a character, and so like, and it's such specific music that like the list of prerequisites was like really different than any other casting call that you were looking at that, for a musician at Cirque. But I think that's just kind of like the beauty of that gig is like it's so specific,
right?
And I think now, that like Gina was there for a long time, and she like, like really built that character from the ground up, and it was such a wonderful thing. And then like I had spent time there, and now they have a new muse, Sharon, and like, it's cool that it's kind of like becoming this like this, small club of people that like understand what that character and
right.
what that
you were
thing
one
is
of
about.
the you were
So
one
it's
of the
just so
James
specific.
Bonds. Yeah.
What's that?
You were one of the James Bonds.
You feel like that sometimes.
Yeah.
You're all incognito with all the makeup on and everything. You're just like, nobody knows it's me. I'm just here like doing whatever.
It's kind of cool
kinda
though.
fun.
You can, yeah, that's pretty neat. They've got such a diverse repertoire. I saw Cirque du Soleil.
They have so many shows. It's crazy.
I saw.
There's so many different things.
I'm not familiar with all their stuff. I saw Allegria in the '90s,
Oh yeah, that's still running.
Is it? Okay. And
Yeah.
I was familiar with them, but I wasn't that interested. And I think my mother actually bought tickets and said, "We're going to see this." And I came away just stunned
Yeah.
and I had
That's
the, yeah, I had the soundtrack in my, car for a couple of years. It was really good, but really, really artistically impressive, just music and performance wise. It's really neat. Um,
yeah, it's amazing.
Now, of all the people you've worked with, I mean, you've worked with, I mean, just everybody. Tony, we talked about. I mean, you've played with so many people like, Stu Ham. I mean, the Iron Maidens, all kinds of stuff. Is there anybody like on your list that you'd like to work with? Is
Oh
that,
my god, I mean, so many people,
yeah.
Um, you want me to like and trying to pick one?
I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's just anybody off the top of your head that it doesn't have to be realistic, even.
I would love to do something with Devin Townsend. I
Yeah,
think
oh,
that would
yeah.
be really cool. That would be like both like like rewarding as a guitar player and very interesting as just like an overall musician.
Yeah. Yeah, he's
So
such an artist. And I first
yeah,
became aware of him when he did the album with Steve Vai. Was the first time I
yeah,
heard him.
right.
But he's really just expanded beyond that and just gone off his own
Oh,
path.
and just all across the gamut too. I mean, he has so many like lesser known side projects and
Right.
obscure records of all these kind of different styles, and I really like that.
Yeah, he really is. He's kind of a heavier, and this is a very vague analogy, but a heavier Frank Zappa. He's just into his own thing.
I can see what you mean by that though, and you know what, like he comes from kind of like that. It's really heavily involved with that camp,
Right.
and those Zappa players and all those guys, and like there's definitely something to that. I mean, I think it's just like this, you know, like concept of writing. Like I think is probably what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm thinking more like just a focused individualism. Like he's not worried about.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, he's not gonna. Yeah, he's not gonna write a top 40 hit tomorrow. He's gonna write
No.
whatever obscure thing comes to his mind, and however he fits that puzzle together. And that's how I'm relating it to him. He's just a very unique person. He's just driven.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the positive things about everything being DIY today. It's
Yeah.
like you can go full on being, you don't have to ask anyone. You can, you can still make it work. So I think he's a great example of that. I think you're right.
Yeah. Now, when you're writing, how does a song idea usually start for you, or is there a usual way? Is it usually a riff, a melody, a chord progression, or one other thing I was going to ask is like, do you ever take inspiration from like movies or a pretty landscape, or just is it outside musical areas?
Yeah, it's all of those things, and especially the latter. I definitely like try to get outside. I actually moved to a small town on purpose because I want to be outside as much as possible because I do feel like that makes a difference for me with writing. But usually more so in the last few years too, like I hear a melody in my head, or now I'll hear like the melody and the whole arrangement in my head, or at least like the melody will at least suggest the chords, if nothing else, or at least enough of them for me to like then go back and figure out what the harmony should be if it's like not super clear. But over the years it's been like different approaches and different ways and different things, and now just more like the culmination of it just seems to be that I just hear more stuff in my head, and that's kind of what I was hoping for, because
Sure.
first of all, you feel like the music more or less writes itself, and you still have to then arrange it and everything, and because it's not always the whole arrangement that you hear, or sometimes you put it down and you're like, this isn't right, or whatever. So it's not like there's no anguish after that, but at the very least, I feel like, okay, like, but this was my original thought. Because if I really heard it like that, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad, but I can't really argue against it. Like, I know that that's what it was. So at least I'm starting from a place where it's like, well, this is obviously what I meant. If I'm going to, make alterations to that now, that's one thing, but at least I'm starting from a place where like I know it's pure, I know that like it really came from somewhere, and now I feel better about taking it somewhere else if I need to.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Now, when you hear things, I'm curious because I don't. If I hear a melody in my head, I don't really know like what key that's in. I just have to start monkeying around, and literally I have to like maybe work some chords up through it, and then be like, okay, I guess this is an E, or I guess this is in C major.
Yeah.
I don't hear that in my head. I don't have
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't hear that. You know what I mean? It's like, I think if you had perfect pitch and you sang that melody to yourself, you'd be like, okay, I know what those notes are because they have perfect pitch, and I know I'm not one of those people.
Yeah.
But to me, that doesn't really matter. You know, what matters is I heard it, I can put it down, I can always analyze it later.
Okay.
You know? So it's the knowledge of my schooling and my experience that at least allows me to like be able to analyze it and change it and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's good to know that somebody as accomplished yourself isn't just necessarily, because I talked to some musicians who are just like, yeah, and that's in this, and they, you know, they have perfect pitch or relative pitch, and
yeah, I mean, yeah, it doesn't mean that like you won't figure it out quickly or something like that, but I mean, I think like it's definitely not a prerequisite. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Now, with the new album coming up, do you have? I mean, how far along are you in the process? Have you X amount of songs written, release date, or what?
I don't want to say a release date yet, just in case stuff changes. But we're really far into it now. The reason that the process is kind of long is this record ended up having like a bunch of different styles on it. And it's literally like, it's the concept being that it's a spectrum of styles. You're going to start one place and kind of fade from one style to the next using commonalities and like eventually end up in a totally different place. And the hope is that you can also start from the end and go to the beginning, and it should have the same effect.
Okay.
Hopefully, we'll see, you know, we're not there yet. It's like, okay, that's the concept. I hope it works. But anyway, part of that meant that, you know, I wanted to use one producer and one person kind of building the tracks because it needs to be uniformity if I want all that to work. And so most of the work falls on my producer, who's like kind of, you know, left taking my demos of me showing him like, okay, this is as like close to what I want as I can convey to you with like my limited logic programming skills, and someone whose job it is to do that and to play keyboards and like, you know, build the track and everything. He's building pretty much the entire arrangement and then sending it back to me to record my parts on.
Okay.
So I understand how much work I put on his shoulders, and it's someone who cares about little details, and, you know, especially on a record like this, like everything is in the little details. You know, that's how we have to decide, you know, what the commonalities between the styles are going to be on one song. You know, are the drums kind of going to be taken more from this vein or more from this vein, and how are we going to connect it? And those kind of decisions, you know, just kind of require a lot of experimentation and a long time and everything. But we want it to be right, and we want the concept to work and everything. So I'm happy to give it a little bit more time for it to be the statement that I want to make, because it's, you know, I've come this far, you know.
Yeah, and that's
I think it's a worthwhile you know, group of songs to give that extra attention to.
Yeah, and it's that's tough, because when you're getting it recorded, I mean, I can understand how you hear something like, no, I really wanted that note to be a legato attack, like that one note.
And, you know, at least that's the stuff that I do on my own. So like,
you can control it.
I can do that to myself. You know what I mean? Like I can control it, and I can do it at a quick pace, and like it's a lot more tiring. You know, I feel a lot more burned out at the end of the day because I have to engineer it and play it, and that's you know, and sometimes like troubleshooting like whatever gear failures or something that comes up, and it's like you're the one dealing with it. It's a lot more like of a hassle, but it's at least, it's something I can control, and like I can say, okay, that's going to be done on this date, and that'll happen. So that's the easy part, you know. It's like all the question marks about the music itself that's the hard part.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard letting go of control too, to let somebody develop the rest.
It's a back and forth, you know what I mean? And when we are working like remotely, because he is in Italy. His name is Alex Argento, and he played keys on my last album, which is, you know, big part of why I knew I wanted him to be involved in a bigger way on this record, because I knew that he's the kind of musician that can understand, you know, the stringing together of all these styles on one record. And, you know, that was something that I was like, I kind of don't know who I'm going to really be able to trust with that. That's such a big ask, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm kind of like, it's much easier to be patient because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and at least you got a history with him that you know his work progress and his ethic. Yeah. Now I was going to ask you if there's any new territory you're covering the album, but it sounds like there obviously is.
Yeah. So there's a lot of like, you know, stylistically things that came out that I was just like, okay, all right, like you know, like there's like a Parisian sounding song and you know more Spanish stuff and
it's all polka. No.
It's not polka, but there is like 2 songs with accordion on it.
Okay, that's funny.
He shreds. It's crazy. Like he plays it like a bebop player a lot of times, you know.
And what's his name?
His name is Huber Gall.
That's funny.
He's out in Vegas. He was playing on another Cirque du Soleil show. That's how I met him. And I thought that's the funniest thing too is like I thought that I was gonna have the hardest time like finding an accordion player. You know, I was like, well, that's gonna be the hardest thing to find. Like, where am I gonna find an accordion player? And like one of the girls at Wardrobe was like, well, my husband's a trombone player. I'll just ask him. I'm like, well, duh. There's like this whole network of people here at these shows. I was just used to like not having other musicians at my show. You know, we had another singer and that's it. You know, and I'm forgetting like that this town is full of great readers, pit musicians, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that was actually very easy. And he's French, you know, French-born guy, which, you know, I'm always happy when it's authentic and everything.
Sure.
And that was awesome.